I'm gonna start recording, by the way.
I also thought that Google Calendar at least normally converts, like if you're on a different time zone. But
It does,
hmm.
but now it's saying me, it's basically telling me when the event was set for.
Hmm.
And I think it was set for Central at this point.
But that's yeah, but that's like a little note, but on your like calendar thing, it probably has it's in the right
Oh,
place.
it's in the right place, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when I click on it, it says, oh, that event was scheduled for 2
Yeah.
p.m. Central
It is set to Central Time. I don't know why.
because you had set it to UTC. It may have converted.
It's not supposed to, but I don't know. Maybe Discord screwed up and I put everything. I don't know. I guess we'll need to reset everything and just set it to Central Time. So I'll do that. Um, and then if someone has time later on, we can set it back to UTC.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for now.
Cool.
Okay,
Cool.
so we've started recording. Let's go
Yep.
around. Who wants to start?
I can start because I'm quick. I haven't done anything, and hopefully I'll start working on things next year. So in a month and a half.
Okay. Okay.
We'll see.
Are you planning, or do you have ideas for what you'll be? Is it back to the
Yeah, back to
reason
Reason
score or
Tracker.
reason track
So I'll probably, rewrite it from scratch for the 10th time.
with AI?
Yeah, it will be a little faster and a little buggier because of AI. So yeah.
Why? Um, I'll go next. I've been busy enough with discourse graphs, mostly with uh, infrastructure stuff that doesn't concern this group. I have started thinking, okay, what would it look like to expose the discourse graph data? I did a JSON LD schema, a toy JSON LD schema. Hi, Carl. But it's still very much non-official, and let's see if this gets anywhere. But I'm beginning to think, what would it look like as JSON LD? I'm thinking hard about how do we want to be flexible about schemas? What does it mean to have schemas but not want to be constrained by schemas, which has been the plague of RDF? And the reality is, it always makes sense to have schemas and versioning of schemas, but what you want is a casual creation and very casual uh, links between schemas, like lenses. That I've said before. But I'm also realizing that my nested frames proposal does help the schema linking, but that needs getting more serious about. Another thing I did recently was I was early this week. There was a IETF meeting in Montreal, and the AT Proto community met to present AT Proto as an IETF standard. And I spent time with the AT Proto community. There was a kind of birds of the feather off conference. And so that was really instructive because I was wondering, how is AT Proto as a transport network for revisable assertions, because I keep thinking about, concepts need to be revised all the time and yada yada. And AT-Proto, I don't know if that interests people here, but I thought of using AT-Proto as a source of truth. It's a bit terrible because it's not a real log. You can modify a past entry or delete a past entry. Uh, as, as they say, it's not a blockchain. It makes sense in the sense of if it's a post, you want to be able to edit it, which is a bit terrible when you're doing hard references. But on the other hand, as a sync layer, it still makes sense, I think, to use something like AT-Proto. It's very lightweight, very easy to use. There's a lot that's right about AT-Proto. But I was hoping it was more like event sourcing and only up to a point. I could get more into details of that. But that's the top level picture. Over.
I can go next. I finally got all my nonprofit paperwork together. It's a lot of annoying reading, like form instructions and stuff and laws and stuff. But I have a meeting with my to be board next week for everybody to meet each other, and that should be interesting. And then I've also just been working on a refactor, which is due to a poor data structure that I started with. It's not a big deal, but it's annoying. That's okay. I think that's all for me.
Okay.
Don't know who's gone yet, but if the question is updates related to canonical debate, I have a no op because I have been distinctly not doing anything canonical debate related for like 6 months or 4 months something. So I just came to try to drop in and maybe get motivated again.
Fair enough.
So
Oh wait, sorry. Sorry to cut you off, Jack. I always do this. I say something and I forget. I did meet with that guy. What is his name? South. Someone mentioned him in Saif Hauptsch. Does that name ring a bell from? Is it Philo? This thing he does. Philo AI. Does that name ring a bell? Mark Antoine, you're in that. What is that one Discord? Sorry. The Discourse Graph Project. Someone mentioned him, the Discourse Graph Project.
That's
And then
me because I'm working for them now.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then I think I liked his something on his Substack, or he saw that I looked at him on LinkedIn and we met. And I mentioned this
That
group. I don't know if I'll send you the like it's fylo.io is the project.
F F
Um,
I fylo.io.
yeah. So he's working on. I mean, you'll probably know more about just reading it in 5 minutes
Oh,
than I can
that's
tell you. But
interesting.
he's
Yes.
working on, yeah, like open science.
Collaborative AI. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm not aware of it and I should be. Thank you.
yeah.
That's
You're welcome. That's about all I have to say. I mean, it was a nice conversation, but he's what I guess what was interesting about our conversation is he's focusing a lot more on like the collaborative side of this problem, as in like researchers work together. They're generally high trust and high reliability. And he was interested that like my work and I think several of our work kind of like focused on the where people disagree, and he called that like the edges, where there's like disagreement. Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting sort of because it
no, I
never occurred to
definitely.
me, that distinction. But yeah, it's very salient.
Okay, that's extremely interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Jack. Now I'm done.
Philo's core is on GitHub. So it is an open source project and it's deeply in the space that I care about.
Yep.
As does Marc Antoine. We're working together on a project which will provide a training ground for people to learn, to collaborate and do deep research. Ideally in classrooms, but certainly outside of classrooms. But then in the background, we both are working on projects. His is Hyper Knowledge and mine is Open Sherlock. And Open Sherlock informed Hyper Knowledge, but Hyper Knowledge informs Open Sherlock. It's a vicious circle, very, very strong feedbacks. And so when I say Open Sherlock, I'm really referring to an ecosystem that includes hyper knowledge, because it's hyper knowledge through my lens. This is not necessarily Marc Antoine's lens. I'm not putting words in his mouth. Hyper knowledge is the sensation stream that feeds into Open Sherlock. It's the collaboration space that allows for knowledge refinement, and then Open Sherlock takes it from there and does the topic mapping and other kinds of things. So that's fundamentally the big project. And for the record, Marc Antoine and I have been invited to speak before some cadets and faculty at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And there's a set of slides that I created and Marc Antoine contributed to. And I'll drop a link to them in the chat. Now, they are not really public, not for spreading out to news feeds until after we've met with them, and that's on the 14th of this month. But I will go now and get the link to those slides, and you can peruse them as you will. I should give you a warning. And I'm going to give you a second link in the chat, and that is to Jon Stewart interviewing Geoffrey Hinton. And it's a very, it's an hour and a half long, very cogent and lucid conversation, essentially about the history of neural nets. From one of the pioneers. I mean, he wasn't the first. Donald Hebb gave the idea that Hebbian learning was the way nets would improve, but Hinton pointed out that if you actually do Hebbian alone, what you end up with is all neurons firing. They just end up reinforcing each other and they all fire. So he talks about back propagation. But I'm talking a different story, and my different story is hybrid. The idea of asking a neural net that was trained on news feeds and emails and whatever is not the way forward if you really want to solve a lot of world's problems in general. You need something closer to what the human brain does, which is continuous learning. So how do you use neural nets, LLMs, in concert with other platforms which do symbolic and probabilistic reasoning? How do you use those two together? That's what my talk is about. And it's increasingly looking like an outlier in the world, but I still maintain that it's the way forward. I'm going to say over and put some links in the chat.
Wait, what viewpoint is an outlier?
The hybrid computing is increasingly becoming an outlier. And I'll give you an example. Take the link that you just gave us, the one of what is it, Lycos or Laos?
Philo.
Whatever, yeah. There's a whole spectrum at GitHub of research assistants that are pure LLMs. No appeal to anything like a cognitive architecture. But I point out in my talks, and I will say this here, when people began to realize the weakness of LLMs, sorry if I'm hogging this show, they said, well, let's just let the LLM go out on the web and find better answers, which is an acknowledgement that there was something missing. Now, I'm going to claim that LLMs post-trained for specific things like drug discovery or whatever are stunningly stunningly good. They actually outperform humans in diagnosing certain diseases when reading X-rays, blah blah blah. But they're not AGI. But as people said, wait a minute, if we're going to go to AGI, we need more than an LLM. So they said, let's do this research augmented generation. But then somebody else came along and said, but why doesn't the damn thing remember what it learned? Because it doesn't. And so then you had GraphRag. Let's put an LLM in the game and let it grow a world model from its research and rely on that instead of just always researching. So you see the LLM people recognizing the weaknesses and migrating in the direction of hybrid. But an awful lot of people are staunch, pure connectionism, and I'm a rebel. Over.
Yeah, it's not that marginal in a way, but it's still marginal. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about GraphRag, for example, and that's kind of hybrid-ish, but it's still using kind of, I'm assuming that the graph is there and that you're querying it with the RAG, which is cool, but how do you create a vetted graph with the help of AI where we're nowhere near there? Anywho, did everybody speak?
Did Dorian want to go? I think everybody else is
Oh,
gone.
Dorian came. Hello.
Hi, I'm sort of semi here. I am cleaning the house, so I'm just listening.
Fair.
Fair enough.
Fair. Okay. Should we go around? Is there something people want to discuss collectively?
I'm pretty open to whatever. I did post in the Discord like a month ago or so about in response to Mark Antoine, you had posted your like protocol, your like disambiguation protocol or
Yeah.
something like that. I was curious if we had ever, or if there were ever like UX designs, because I feel like we've talked about UX in the past for something like some
Yep.
possible implementation, just of like, you have a node and then you realize there's ambiguation, so you split it. Like, what might the UI look like for, you split a node and then that like informs the neighbors that they need to be updated or something like that. I was just curious if anyone has come across UIs for that kind of thing, or UI designs.
I have not yet spent adequate time on the UI, but here's my base thought. I think here I'd be inspired by FedWiki up to a point with more bells and whistles. FedWiki in the sense, in the sense that everybody should have their own copy of the node. Like, this is what I believe this concept can be described as. And you'd have links to, oh, this is Jack's version, this is Joel's version, this is Bentley's version, this is Dorian's version, this is Carl's version. And I think what's really interesting is how do we achieve consensus? Like, if we each have our version, that's a divergence place. But we'd have, oh, we think this is the same as that, or it's possibly the same as that. And I'd have to admit to agree. I'd have to say, I think it's the same up to a distinction. And then up to a distinction may mean there's a common abstraction that goes over both our concept, or there's or there's a common abstraction and a distinguishing element that I can identify. But let's assume it's more or less the same, and I want to just, or I suspect it's the same, but I'm not sure. And I have a doubt, so I'll ask a clarifying question. Oh, is this part of your definition? And then you could say yes, no, we agree, we disagree. So at some point we'll have these kind of distinction process, and I'd see these as kind of pure comment pending conversation, but questions. And when the answers get resolved, we can say, okay, we have multiple instances that seem to be convergent in meaning. Now, that's convergence in meaning, and then there's convergence in form. Like, which description of the concept do people find the clearest, the most useful, the more this, the more that? What I hope is that when somebody comes and says, oh, I want to talk about this concept, they'll be presented with, here's a bunch of definitions by different people. Is there one that takes your fancy that you think you could just reuse? And then you could reuse that, and then some get popular, and cool, that's fine. And if I think, okay, this one is popular, but I think it's missing something, then I can propose, here's my version, here's your version, here's a pull request to your version. Do you think this would make things clearer? And then people could see, here's a proposal improvement. And if they like it, it's not that you have to accept it. It's that they can choose to adopt the modified one. And again, there's a popularity contest going on there. What is it that people find the clearest expression of that concept with minimal ambiguities? If I think, oh, there's an ambiguity there, then I'll say there's an ambiguity, and people will again say, oh, I think most of the time I mean this one or this one, and then we'll see. Or we'll find the community is split and there's a social ambiguity, and that's something worth, again, making salient. Like this concept that has been very popular, somebody pointed out an ambiguity and people have found that ambiguity to be salient. They'll fall on both sides of it. And so you should avoid using that concept without resolving the ambiguity. And you expect people to migrate. And I'd like to keep it as a placeholder. Whenever you're using that term, hey, there's this distinction that people have found useful. And you may want to think where you fall on that, because that has led to confusion. So in terms of UX, the UX is, here's my version, here's here are the most popular versions that seem similar. I'll adopt some of them as, yeah, I really agree, this seems similar. And then you can play the game of either getting closer to the popular one because you want to be part of that network who agrees on that concept definition, or proposing improvements, proposing a synthesis and say, this is how I would formulate it so it takes into account things I think are important without detracting from this popular version that people obviously find useful. Now, the other reality is useful is usually useful for an audience, right? Useful for specialists versus useful for, and that those are probably, we may want to, this I haven't thought in detail, but I think it would be useful to have more than one head to the popularity contest and try to see if we can distinguish who's the ideal audience for this. What level of expertise is it ideal for?
So Marc-Antoine, on that point, if I can interrupt, unless you want to.
Yeah, go.
I find that as I've been exploring now, when you say like concepts, are these analogous to words? So like if someone's using the word capitalism, then we want to define that concept?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I find out that a lot of times, even within the same discussion, there's the same audience. There's just simply not enough words for the distinctions we need. So like if we're having a debate about capitalism, and a lot of times for people it means, the government does not, does not own the means of production, which is the original definition. But for a lot of people, it means the ability to make profit, or the encouragement and the focus on profit is the singular thing. And those are two very different things, but there's not a word profitism, which I'd like to use for that. Anyway, so I'm finding that, and for UIs, what I was thinking of is that you would have capitalism and then like a sub number or an upper number that would be like 1, or it'd just be a number 1, 5, 6, 7, and that way you'd be pointing to which sub definition or concept you're referring to in a conversation. Anyway, so that's kind of what I've been thinking about.
No, that's all
Wait,
true. Oh, sorry.
just to clarify, so like you'd have like a node that says capitalism or something, or like it refers to capitalism if it's like a claim, and then like super text of the word itself, it would just have a number, and then you kind of like a sub, what do you call it, a footer thing where you click on the number and it's like, this is the longer definition, or
Yeah, that's the way I was thinking. It would appear in the UI for general readers.
I agree. Okay, every definition, and that's another thing I didn't get into, that's really important. Every definition is going to use other definitions, right? And I think if we can have a kind of index of agreement on a definition, right? This definition is really uncontroversial, everybody agrees on it. This definition, people are not sure. So it would be nice to be able to say, try to make your definition depend on terms that are more agreement, that have more agreement than the term you're trying to define. And that could be, it's a kind of well-foundedness for your definition. It won't always work, it's not always possible, but I think it's a great thing to encourage. Now, in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think you're absolutely right that given a word, there'll be a kind of top known different emergent meanings. It's probably not going to be a closed source, it's going to be an open source, but we should be able to say these are the main ideas. But the idea is you're using capitalism in your UX because you're defining another concept or making a claim. A claim, for me, a claim is a kind of
Probably
concept
making
also.
a claim, yes, which is a concept,
probably making a claim using the concept. But what I'm saying is the claim for me is also a concept. So there's concept refers to concept, basically. So your claim about capitalism uses the concept capitalism. So it should be a hyperlink in traditional hyperlink fashion. And it's not so much about the number, it's about which version of capitalism are you linking to? And then people will see, oh, this one, you're using a definition that a lot of people already agree with, or this one, you're using a slightly more technical definition that maybe some people disagree with or don't understand because it's too technical or whatever, right? And that's fine. I mean, if you're using a precise definition, it's going to be more technical and people will have to learn what it means. Or maybe you're just using it at a more casual level, then again, that's fine. And then, but that should be explicit.
Substitute it with variables. Just be like, in this context, we're talking about, C _11. Like,
yeah. And even different representation. So maybe capitalism could be changed to, with parentheses, profit capital. Yeah, so lots of different representations. Yeah, it'd be held in a data thing, just for short term and for hard code printed things. So, I actually own term.fyi that I was using to where you would put in the word and then the / number and you could see what definition it is. So it can be linked to from multiple places.
There was a project a number of years ago. I mean, there have been several. And I think like even what's it called? Like Gravatar does this by default. It effectively takes like a UUID or cryptographic hash or something like that, and then it takes those, chops those up, and then turns them into pixels or vector, geometric shapes or something like that, and maybe color palette or something like that. And so what you get is this like picture or object or something that is derived from like a cryptographic hash. And so you could almost make it so like, okay, like you could even have this like just embedded in the run of text, like rather than have, because the thing is, the other thing about it too is like if you have like capitalism sub one, you know, people are gonna fight over like which one gets to be number one, you know, like it's just gonna be endless, you know. So the idea would be like sub out the, like you could sub out the concept and be very, very precise about it. And you could just like put down a stamp, you know, or a glyph or something like that. So it's generated, derived from like a cryptographic hash. And then it was like a 256 bit, like a SHA 256 will make a square, right? Because the 256 is, and then if you had, so you could have like a little, make it like draw a little picture or something like that. And I've done this in some other stuff, but anyway, the idea would be that you know, you could read it, like you could read a paragraph where the terms are being defined incredibly precisely just with the use of these like substitute glyphs that are like basically cryptographically unambiguous. Like they cannot be, you cannot have a term collision there because it's just not possible. You know, and then you can overlay, well, what does this actually mean to human beings? Like, what is this word actually to a person? And so in the case of capitalism, you just plunk it in. And so I think what would be interesting about that, and I'm just pulling this right out of my ass right now, but like I think what would be interesting about a user interface like that is you could make very clear that you're making very clear that you're making very clear, you know, like that we are using a very precise definition for this or that or the other word. So when we make an assertion or claim about something, we're very precise in what we're making the claim about. We know what we mean by term X, and then, you know, you can just basically overlay that for the human reader. Now, like the way that, you know, it's kind of like when typical, you know, various, you know, pick your continental philosopher, where it's like, or, you know, actually rather analytic philosopher, where you're just, you know, this is what I mean by that, you know, like a Wittgenstein or something like that, right? Where, you know, you got a Tractatus kind of like, well, this is what I mean by this, and this is the next, like it's a Euclidean, you know, stack of proofs or something like that and definitions. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of options for UI and stuff like that. I was also the short numbers. I mean, first it'd be first come first serve for the numbering, because once it's used, you can't edit it.
And this is exactly something I'm trying to avoid. For me, that's a clear anti-goal in the sense that I want it to make it very easy and casual to say, oh, let me perfect my definition, or, you know, my first attempt at definition was not that clear, let me make it clearer. But once you've made it clearer, people who thought they agreed don't agree anymore. So it is a different definition. So there's a versioning is very much at stake.
It's just a problem when you're putting it in plain text and you're putting it in systems that don't have UI, you know, don't have, if it's fully transportable. I mean, there's a balance in that, and all these things are open. I'm just talking about my initial kind of idea and that website. So it would just, the number, you would just choose the next number for your next definition and use that going forward, and you can edit your documents.
Yeah, but and this is why, again, numbers imply priority and ancient, and I think I agree with I agree with Dorian. If we can avoid the fight over early numbers and make it very casual to perfect. But on the other hand, and this is important, if I'm perfecting my definition, it's a new number, but it is in the continuity of the previous one. And you want people to refer to the previous one to get a signal that now they could update to the new and improved one, which you don't have if you just pick a new number because you may not have the link. So you have to have that link that this old version that I created, I propose to proceed with this new version. You may disagree. You may think, no, the previous one was fine, or I don't agree with the new one. I don't agree with where you're leading me, and that's perfectly legit. But in many cases, it's clarification, improvements, and you will want to have the latest and greatest.
Well, yeah, that doesn't mean you can't do that. Because when you
Yeah.
go to the /5 or whatever, we could leave it to where that person still has permission updated to say what their intent changes were and stuff like that. It's just the shortest representation, and that could also be used in speech. So you're saying, capitalism 52, as opposed to saying a cryptographic hash verbally. So
Fair.
and displaying
Fair.
on screen. Although the other way to do it is you actually give them symbols at the time. So you start the conversation saying, when I use capitalism star, I'm meaning this definition. And when I say, and I didn't ever think about using symbols, which are not, people don't think of them in a particular order.
Pronounceable. They're not pronounceable, and that's a problem. That's a
Well, I
good
mean,
point.
some are. Yeah, right. So if you use star and $, but that has a limited
Smiley
number
face.
of hash.
What I expect to do is to go more in terms of, here's my definition as at time t, and this statement was made at time t, so first definition at time t, and then I may or may not say, oh, update the definitions to all the updated definitions or whatever, and then if I want to refer to someone else's definition, then I'll say, well, capitalism according to Bentley, capitalism according to this, and make all these space reference. And what I expect will happen is there will be institutions that says this is the whatever economic consortium definition of capitalism. And I think this is mostly going to be useful in the case of scientific consortium for, say, medicine, YEVO.
So when you have common overlaps, like people using the word capitalism two different ways in the same conversation, for the representations on that, are you saying that they should choose a different word so that you know what it is, or you know what I'm saying?
Or maybe you like assign a word or a phrase like, oh, this is that university's definition or whatever, that just something that distinguishes from like the other definition seems like sufficient, at least.
So I think source is going to be really useful, and I would have it with timestamp. Something AT Proto taught me, which is really interesting, is they have each post has a URI and a cryptographic hash. And so you can have a URL or URI with the cryptographic hash, which means if it's changed, you know it's changed. You don't necessarily have access to the past version. As I said, it's not a blockchain, it's not it's not a log, but at least you know that this thing has been changed. Anyway, the more important, I would like to have history personally of definitions, but yeah, I think it makes sense that if I'm beginning to speak to capitalism, capitalism according to Marx versus capitalism according to Mitch McConnell versus capitalism according to, I will want to say whose version. And if I start meaning, like, there's some people start putting adjectives, right? We speak about surveillance capitalism and all the variants of capitalism as we discover new ways to talk about these. And I think having these adjectives as shorthands for actually very long definitions is perfectly appropriate.
I just had the thoughts that, like, what about also just like each definition could have, I know we've talked in the past about like tags, like a set of tags to represent like a context. Like potentially you could just have a set of tags on each definition, like, oh, this one relates to Marx, this one, I don't know, the parts that are in it, and then to refer to one over the other, you could just like mention the tag that is distinct, or like one of the distinct tags between them, maybe.
Yes, and the thing is, like, for example, many people are arguing over what did Marx mean or what did Adam Smith mean by this or that term. So you'll need a lot. You may end up needing a lot of tags.
Yeah, I suppose so.
capitalism according to Marx, according to Marcuse, according to whoever, right? It's like there's layers of epigraphy. If you've been in social science, you've seen these attribution wars. And that's, again, that's important. Because these are real distinctions, hopefully meaningful.
It does remind me that like some definitions are I guess it reminds me of the structure I used for ameliorate, where you have like a solution that's broken into components, and like these are the expected effects, where like a definition of a thing, I feel like some of the times, at least for capitalism, like a definition can be, okay, like these are the components of my definition, and then like for another definition, you take away one component, you add another one, and it's just like kind of this like structure of a definition with maybe Marx says that like this effect is expected from this part of capitalism, or these are the final outcome, and so a definition could be like this like diagram type thing as well, and maybe that I guess that sounds way over complex, but like the benefit is that if the diagram is like more accurate to what it actually is, then like maybe that would help resolve some of the disagreement about what the definition is.
And this is where I care so much about distinctions, saying what is the distinction between this definition and that definition? Can we find the key distinctions? And those should be not that huge set. Like it should be possible to reduce all the hundreds of definitions to a few key distinctions that partition the set, and the different definitions become a power set of the distinguishing elements, and you get a lattice of which distinctions apply, because sometimes some distinctions don't apply.
Mm-hmm.
You can be undefined with respect to a given distinction, which is also fine. But the idea of you'll be using distinctions, it has to be in terms of less controversial terms. It's always like you're growing a language from more elementary terms. Everybody here knows about the Guy Steele on Growing a Language conference. It was epic. I was there. It was UPSLA 98, I think, in Vancouver. And he gave this conference about growing a language, and he was explaining how Scheme was grown. He's one of the key Scheme authors, and he was on the Java team, and Java was growing at that time. 97, you're right, thanks. And he didn't tell us at the beginning, but he gave the whole conference using very, very simple words. And basically he assumed all monosyllabic words were primitives and anything else had to be defined. It was stunning.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Any other topics?
I don't know if I answered the UI question well, but and thanks, Dorian. Lots of interesting links. I'll have a look as well. But it is related to the topic about schemas, right? If you want to be casual about creating new schemas, you have to have a way to make schemas, define a schema in terms of simpler schemas. And this is why I think I care so much about the nested frame schema. Like, I think that rather, yes, I believe in lenses and I think they're useful, but if we can say, oh, this schema is defined in terms of simpler subschemas and relations, then that becomes, if I create another schema with similar subschemas, that becomes already a handle on which we can connect our schemas and say, oh yeah, they're the same except. And that I haven't thought through yet, but saying this is what they have in common. Now, how do you explain what they have that's different? Again, that's the question of distinctions. It's, I've been thinking this is related in a weird way to the conflict, not conflict, but the schools of object orientedness. Do you use inheritance or composition? Do you define a concept by ontologies and abstractions and super concepts, which you generally have to agree on, which has proven to be an obstacle? Or do you define a concept in terms of simpler concepts? And that's kind of composition-ish. That I think allows for it might be easier to align on subcomponents. But that's an intuition. It's not work yet. David, you came late and you didn't get any part of the roundtable. Do you want to?
What's that?
Do you want to just give a status report?
Yeah, I guess the latest thing on the app I've been making is just well, yeah, I have a lot of yeah, there's just I guess there's a lot of things that take longer than you think. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this in this amount of time, and then you're like, oh wait, something like um changing it. So I had it so that you can um invite someone to debate, or sorry, I had it so that you can pick someone to debate, or you can pick someone um to help you, like join your team. But ultimately, uh, you don't want to just have users um, just being able to uh, pull in anyone they want. It needs to be like an invitation kind of process. So you invite someone and they say accept or decline. So I was thinking, well, that's not going to be a huge lift. Just change it a bit. But yeah, just thinking about these things that yeah, something like that can get very complicated, and then yeah, having a UI for the accepting and declining, and then also just um yeah, handling
Notification
all
or
the
something.
invitations rather than uh um just saying now we're engaging, and it's just a whole other step is pretty complicated. So, I mean, I'm hoping to kind of wrap that up soon. I have it mostly working, except I there's bugs. I noticed that, so I need to figure out there's bugs here and there. Um, yeah, also I had to kind of change the whole user interface so that you can see, your debates you're helping with, and debates that you're invited to help or to debate someone. Um, so yeah, so I'm kind of wrapping that up, and things the things we kind of talked about last time, I found that very interesting. Like, yeah, I don't, but I've kind of basically just like pushed off those kinds of considerations, like whether it should be called a debate. Uh, Um, uh, in general, I do think not only does, the word debate cause uh, a sense of make you think like, okay, we're not here to change our minds, we're here to win or whatever. But on top of that, I think it also can make it uh, people less likely to engage if uh, if you're asking your friend, "Hey, you want to come, work out these ideas on this debate app? If you want to debate me?" Like if you ask a friend, "Hey, you might disagree on something. Hey, do you want to debate me on it?" Like they're probably just not as likely going to say yes as if you say, discuss. So, but then on the other hand, I have very much like it is it is kind of designed as a debate app, so I'm thinking maybe like thinking of it, maybe changing the name. I could change the name so it's not called debate. They're not called debates, or I don't know. But I'm basically putting that off. Or maybe, having it be considered like a discussion and debate app or something like that. Yeah, conversations. Yeah. I mean, I was even thinking of just um like the name of the app is Argorist, or that's the current name. That's a URL that wasn't taken, a domain name that wasn't taken. So Argorist, and the reason of that would be like it's like an arborist for arguments, even though I guess algorithm actually is a thing that I didn't even realize. So that could be confusing. But our arborist is like you're like an arborist kind of curates uh and maintains trees. This is like maintaining a tree of arguments, arborist. So if I just referred to them as trees rather than debates or something like that, that might also kind of like um uh
Mesh with the current.
yeah, like make people be like, oh, maybe that's why it's called algorithm, like make them help them remember. But anyway, these are all the kinds of things I'm just kind of still thinking about and kicking that down. And there was something else. Yeah, there was a couple other things we kind of discussed last time I was here that also have kind of thought about, but I forget exactly what they
So,
were about.
so what do you in your app, what is your worldview bringing to the table that's not already there? What is your key insight that animates you to plow forward?
Oh, like what is this app going to do differently that's not doesn't exist, you mean?
Well, so we know that Society Library already has a tree collection based collection of all of the arguments of the world. That's their stated mission.
Hmm.
For a while, they even hired Marc Antoine to bring AI into the platform to increase its power, etc. And Marc Antoine is now working with Discourse Graph, and Debate Graph has been up since the aughts. So what I and this and Debate Graph isn't a debate platform at all. It's badly named, and they acknowledge that. It's a structured conversation IBIS platform, but it's also a lot more than that. And so I'm curious, what is it that makes you want to do this new app that isn't already there?
Well, I guess there's a lot of different, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, ways that the app is unique, and I could kind of say like, oh, well, this could be advantageous. But I think in general, I the hope is to have it, and I don't know exactly how it would pan out, but something that would be uh, especially kind of uh, easy to read or grasp kind of quickly. I mean, I guess and more like less not too formal, just kind of very like more like a uh yeah, casual use, or like you don't have to be an academic or anything like that. And not that other things necessarily would be, but this would just be maybe trying to make it as simple as possible, and then also, even though, it's hard to make things simple, but then also uh, the idea would be that you'd have people that centering it around individuals has the benefit of interest in what those individuals think. So um, collaborative trees, I think, are better in some ways because you're not centering it around. I mean, I mean, obviously, the whole canonical issue is, it's good to not center things around individuals so that you're not making the same arguments all the time. But if you do center it around individuals, um, people are, you know, care more about, like if you go on Twitter, people have following specific people. If you go on, uh, there's lots of apps where people have followers and so being able to kind of connect people in that way where this person and you want to follow them, and by following them you can help them uh, collaborate with them, to make their answers, um, and to help them debate somebody else, or uh, and yeah, so in that way, kind of just it would help. My idea is that it would engage more people if it's centered around individuals. And the whole canonical thing is a really big problem, but I'm currently also kicking the ball down a little bit with that. But my long-term plan is to just really like uh have make it very easy to like link things together. So just have there's like lots of individual people debating other people, but um but they all the different debates can be linked together, and then you can kind of long term view them. You know, I guess we were talking about uh, related arguments having different contexts. So you could view similar arguments that are linked to this one argument, but maybe in a different debate. Anyway, but yeah, so it's I don't know if that's I don't know. Yeah, that's some of the I guess the reasons I would say that it's like different from what's out there. And there's probably pros and cons, but yeah.
Well, I heard followers and cross-linking, and those are dear to my heart, and they are novel to what's out there today. Um, Debate Graph will let you cross-link nodes, but if you go to Kialo, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, if there's a whole plethora of debate hub like programs out there, Debatepedia, blah blah blah, and
Hmm.
none of them are saying what you're saying. Um, I think the most interesting of the debate platforms coming along is it's called Because, and it may be because.app. I'm not sure. It's built by the Open University, people that Marc Antoine and I have both worked with.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm told that it will be in GitHub eventually. Uh, it's fundamentally, yeah, because.app. Uh,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and,
You
and
mentioned it last time, and it did seem interesting, and I hadn't stumbled upon it before that, and I actually forgot to really dive into it. But yeah, it does seem.
well, it's not well documented yet. There's going to be a PhD dissertation published pretty soon that was the evolution of the idea. I happen to know that it was funded by the U.S. Naval Office of Naval Research, and because they are looking for an ideation platform for their naval shipyards, ways of improving how the Navy works day to day. And they chose that platform even after, uh, I don't know, 1 or 2 years of experimenting with a program called Mowgli. Mowgli was a program that was licensed from the Institute for the Future, iftf.org, designed by Jane McConigal, There it was called the Foresight Engine. And it was essentially a structured conversation platform, very much like IBIS, uh, but it was first-person shooter, which meant you were responsible for your game moves. You weren't in a guild. You weren't collectively thinking how can I best make a game move. So what you got was a lot of people shooting from the hip. And you're going to get that in any first-person shooter kind of UX. Um, and a lot of people are not skilled at thinking clearly about. I'll give you an example. In one of the Mowgli games, I made a suggestion about something or other that the Navy could do, and a fellow came on and immediately followed me with a response that says the U.S. Navy can't do anything. And I traced him back, and it turned out that he was an enlisted man in the Navy. And so I challenged him. I kept saying, well, how do you know this? How do you know this? How do you know this? And in the end, at the bottom of a very long list of conversations, for which I got a shitload of points, um, he said, well, I was wrong. And that's what you get in first-person shooter universes.
What do you mean by first person shooter? You mean like
Well, okay, so if you go into World of Warcraft, you're in a guild
yeah.
and you have a role to play, and you're going to do that role good or you're going to get kicked out, okay? But if you go into any one of these swords and sabers games, it's just you and your gun shooting. Shoot right, shoot left. You may accidentally shoot your friend, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're shooting. Okay, that's a first-person shooter game. It's a genre of user interface, user experience. And you could just say it's a solo action, okay? And Jeff Conklin, kind of the father of modern IBIS, told me that people lack conversation literacy in general. Now, this group pretty much gets it. We're very civil to each other, and we're very thoughtful in what we say. And we can do that in a small guild like this, okay? But when you're out in the wild, your limbic system is very much in charge. And if you see something you don't like, you're just going to fire. You're not going to withhold, you're not going to keep your powder dry, as the metaphor says. So uh, I don't I don't I don't put much faith in first person shooter, but there is a class of first person shooter that does work, provenly works, and that is the Polis platform and real time Delphi. And that's because people that enter the Polis quest or the real-time Delphi quest are already knowledgeable in the space. And so they're going to be deeply thoughtful about how they respond to the prompts. But the difference is nobody answers them. Nobody comes back to them and says, you're wrong or I disagree. It's not a conversation. And that's the subtle difference. Whereas any kind of a conversation platform, including debates or argument mapping, is
Back and forth.
it can be a back and forth. And what I like about what you learn from going into World of Warcraft is you learn how to keep your powder dry and learn the skill that your role asks you to learn. Because a role in a guild is a promise to perform. So if you're a healer and the knights out in front of you are getting slaughtered, and you see their lifelines start shortening, and so you're busy typing on these keys as fast as you can to save them. But oh shit, all of the people in the guild are having the same problem, and so a few of them die. But you did your best. You know what I mean? You don't just sit there and watch them die. You
But
really want to perform.
now my app would be a first-person shooter. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not hearing you say it's guild and quest based.
No, it isn't, and
But
I don't even know what that would look like exactly, because I think or some of these are somewhat metaphors, right?
they're metaphors, but they're game design. Like that, basically, Jack is working on. Well, we are working together on this application called SenseCraft, where we get people to enrich a debate tree in teams,
Yeah.
and we get into um, getting the team to approve the so-called guild, the team to approve arguments before they're submitted to the other teams. So
Mm.
there's a kind of chewing the cud happening before that. And I've even thought about going turn-based. So all the teams would prepare their arguments, and then they would be invisible to another until the end of turn. End of turn, you see all the new arguments of everybody, and then you prepare another round of arguments. There's pros and cons to turn-based, but the idea is we don't want to, we're trying to devise incentives that favor slower thinking as opposed to instant reaction.
In most
Now, game dynamic is one way to do that. There's other ways to do this, right? But the question is, how do you reward different behaviors? And this is really, are you instantly reacting, or do you have something substantial to contribute? And how do you reward contributions and disincentivize reactions? So,
See, Marc Antoine talked about the reward mechanism. If you go to Jane McConigal's game, she unknowingly built a reward mechanism that encouraged mindless chatter. And the way the reward mechanism worked was you make a game move, you say A causes B, you don't get any points. But the minute somebody says, how do you know that? Now you get some points because they played your game.
Because they interacted with you.
So you answer their question, and maybe you answer their question if you're smart with another question.
Yeah.
Forces
So
them to answer
get more
you.
engagement.
And this was what happened when the Navy guy said the Navy can't do anything. And he and I went blah 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 for a very tall subtree, branch of a tree. And I was just racking up the points like mad, as was he. But I got the initial points by challenging him. And so what I'm saying is, what if you change the reward and the reward mechanism, the leaderboard in World of Warcraft is who killed the most orcs. Okay. Well, what if you changed the reward mechanism to which guild has exhibited the most collaborative skills in working with other guilds to shape ideas? This is new. This is dramatically new.
And how do you measure it?
Yeah.
That's difficult, but let's just say it's work in progress, and I hate to admit it, but it's in Marc Antoine's camp. He's the guy that thought it up. He's the brilliant guy that saw through this, and so I'm not going to interfere with his line of
yeah,
view.
but and the problem is I have too many irons and too many fires, but this is still one of them. I still think about this, among other things.
So what
We
do
can
you
still bring up SenseCraft on minor testing quests to debug it without a scoring mechanism. You don't need the leaderboard to engage couple of guilds in little quests of consequence to people because they're not interested in the competition. They're interested in learning what the quest reveals. So through if you think about it, Facebook had to hire thousands of people to look for bad posts.
Hmm.
And those people started getting PTSD and all of the rest of it. But what we said was, what if you let the guild be responsible for the sanity of the game move they make, which puts the burden not on hired censors, but on guild leadership. In other words, there's a penalty. You let out a truly slanderous game move, and you don't get to be a guild anymore. Now, to some people, that doesn't matter. But if you were paying to play the game, as you do in World of Warcraft, you do care. You paid your money. In fact, in World of Warcraft, you spent $50 just to download the core platform in order to play. And so you have a dog in the fight, and you want to stay in the fight, so you're not going to let your guild basically trash another guild's game move.
But yeah, the whole question of incentives, there's a presentation we did, and the slides are there. Let me give you the slides link, where we speak about incentives and what are we trying to get people, what behaviors are we trying to
Listen.
yeah. So especially slide 7, 8, 9. And yeah, that's anyway. This is one aspect, but I think the real question, the other question Jack was asking more generally, and I think it's an important one. A lot of us are creating conversation apps, and I'm all for it because we're exploring the design space. But Jack made the point. There's a lot of existing stuff. There's the debate maps that Society Library uses, which is extremely evolved app. It has a very complex data model. Brilliant work. There's the earlier work. Some of it is still very good, like debate maps. No, sorry, discourse. What is it again?
Debate graph.
Whole, yeah, debate graph. Thank you. There's so many options, right? And what are we adding to the game? What I want to add to the game is interrupt. Can we get something that allows us to not work in silos? For me, that's really important. That's one thing I want to add to the game. That and evolvable positions. How do we reach towards consensus rather than try to find what's right? And that means having diff and merge dynamics, understand where are we diverging, how can we converge, but for that you have to identify where you diverge. So making that very explicit. Those are my main aspects, plus the frame dynamics, plus this, plus that. There's a lot I want to do actually. But what I'm saying is we have to think about the state of the art is actually, there's amazing, like for example, there's Alcaria, which uses the argumentation schemes, the Walton argumentation schemes. There's a tons of tools. There was a list of tools at some point in our community. I don't know where it's at. I don't think it's been maintained. It's a bit old. And that, do you remember? Do you have the URL for that? And I think we should ask
I don't remember
ourselves.
if this is the right one, but it's one of them I posted.
This looks good. I think this is the one. And then the question is, what are the features of these things? What are the use cases? I'd like to have a distribution of use cases and criteria that distinguish those things so that we can say, okay, how can we improve? What new feature are we adding to this extremely extensive collection?
Mhm.
And that's a good question to ask ourselves. We all want to scratch an itch, of course, but let's try to make it a point to justify our work in terms of what is it that we're adding to the conversation. Anywho, it's 4:20.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of the organizing principle around Sense Atlas was precisely that, to recognize that a piece of software is necessarily going to have boundaries, and there's stuff beyond the boundaries that may need something done with it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just basically shrink wrap around some data. It's RDF, and the idea would be is like the thing is that with that though is if you, it's gonna like you're gonna either have to subscribe to the model or not, right? Like, or you're gonna have to make, you know, your own equivalent classes and properties, if you want to transform it or engage with it. Now, but I mean, the sort of the nature of RDF is like, I'm going to go unilaterally put up this ontology and you either use it or don't, right? Like that's kind of, and,
Yeah.
and if you use it, it gets currency, and if you don't, it just goes away. And so to that extent, you know, like now that can evolve, of course, like that can evolve into a more collaborative model to the extent of people, you know, having some kind of consortium or whatever. I mean, like just like the W3C puts up, you know, its own whatever, but you're gonna get like debate about whose debate app is gonna be the site where we have the debate about the ontology that we use to represent the debate.
I know. But I think it's less important to agree on an app than to agree on the process of having a list of features
Well,
and
just the
what are the key
entities.
features.
Yeah, this the data semantics to me. It's but like you've got the you know, the actual, like if you serialize something out, you know, to a file, like it's just like, is it a JPEG a JPEG? You know, like it's the that level of
And what I'm saying is agreeing on the data format requires agreeing on the requirements.
sure.
And this is why I'm saying we need to have this conversation about use cases and features. Like the basic use case of features of argument mapping, it's pretty much a solved problem. And I don't think we need that many new entries in there.
No.
Debate map's interesting because it adds relevance arguments, which not many people do. But where I think we can go is identifying more complex structures in the argument, such as the argumentation schemes. And for that, I'm arguing you need a frame structure. So that's one thing I want. And also, I want to identify the concept evolution. That's a new feature. So what are I care about this? Does anyone care about this besides me? Maybe not. Seriously, it's if we're going to go towards interop, well, we have to agree on what features are important to people. And if people, for example, decide that concept evolution is not something they want to handle or tackle, fair enough. Can I do my concept evolution in a way that's compatible with whatever we agree on, so that my mechanism become an extension of at least a common data format / ontology / whatever. But for me, I want to be able to model this in a way that it becomes part of the vocabulary of conversation mapping.
So, I mean, my only inclination there is to make a distinction between what a particular exchange format is capable of expressing versus what a particular running software application does with that. right? Like,
Yes.
and what I mean by that is like say for example, so like I have extended IBIS with this like process model ontology. So like the idea is once you've sort of sorted out all your issues, positions, and arguments, you can graduate the issues to goals and targets, and you can graduate positions to tasks. And then
Yeah.
that turns into sort of like an actual concrete project planning thing. And the eventual idea is to take that and integrate it in with like GitHub or Trello or like Microsoft Project even or whatever, to the extent that it can, and so so it's like it's not going to matter at that point though, like what I'm caring about in that regard is like to what extent does the data that my system produces, like is it capable of being injected into another system so that it can drive processes there. And but it's like you don't care about necessarily about the subclasses. Like, so if I have stuff rendered in a, like I've got a PM goal, for example, and a PM task, but those are subclasses of IBIS issue and IBIS position. Like, you don't necessarily have to see that, but you can make that interpretation that these are issues and positions on your side and render it as issues and positions on your side. Whereas you don't necessarily care about the concrete like task metadata or whatever. That's what I'm kind of talking about, sort of extensibility in that regard.
No, I agree totally. Here is where I think having a conversation is really important. I'm proposing we do this kind of extensions with composition rather than inheritance, for example. Do we need to agree on that? Maybe not. Maybe we can, like you're using inheritance, I'd use composition, maybe we can model one with the other, and that's fine. Right? There's reasons why I believe I want to use compositions there. It's a use case I have, and can I argue it out? Or could I convince you? Who knows? But I think it's really important, and there I agree totally with you, that there's so many important data objects that exist in specialized application silos that are relevant in conversations. And I want to be able to treat them as conversation items and sometimes, and as whatever specialized application sometimes. And we have to be able to make that bridging. And that's fundamental, and I think that's something we can all get behind.
Do people have certain apps that they? I'm kind of curious about if people have ideas of like apps that they think would be good to use, like right now. Or I know a lot of people have, I guess, different ones that are. I don't know, like if I don't know if I
Debate
would.
map's pretty good. I really recommend it.
Yeah.
Debate map is pretty good. Have a look at it.
But like, do you think that we should be discussing things on that platform related to like these discussions?
I think that debate map is about debates. What we're talking about here is not so much debates as design decisions. And I think design decisions are not exactly debate shaped. Like, for example, is this a use case we want to support? Is this a data feature we want to support? Those are more about justification and voting and why do I need this and why do I not need this. You can make this debate shaped, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no problem with it.
Kind of like more similar to that.
What?
Is like ameliorate more similar to kind of like
maybe
that kind of
they're
like
kind of like different solutions to problems. If you could treat a use case as a problem to solve with
it's not like
technology.
It's not just like arguing like two sides of an issue. It's
I don't know ameliorate as well. So hey, fantastic. worth looking at it.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it depends how we want to structure the discussion. If we want to, in theory, we could make a set of problems that are like each different use cases, and then from there we could discuss like, oh, this solution or this strategy solves that use case, and we could, ameliorate is built so that you can have the debate on top of that like structure, which might be good,
One
but yeah.
thing about all that is that very few of us are actually like collaborating or working together. So one person's decision doesn't really have an impact on another. When we get more into adopting, Marc Antoine's proposal, cross-system stuff, then that might be a useful way to spend time.
Yeah.
It's I guess it's like if we decide that we do want to have discussions about those like overlapping decisions, I guess, that affect all the possible tools, that could be a common
Well, yeah, I guess it just does seem like it would make sense if there was a group that was like focused on making these kinds of apps for discussion and debating. If they discussed things on some app, one of theirs or another one, it would just kind of uh, make sense if you think that that's a good way to discuss things, then you would think that people that were making those apps would be using them to do that. But I also I don't really care. I just you know I don't know how.
I'll look at ameliorate. I know that's honestly that's news to me, so I'll have a look. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's Joel's.
Oh
yeah,
no, okay. Oh yeah. Sorry, I was thinking about something else. Yeah, I've seen ameliorate before.
Yeah.
It's funny, I thought I had an account there.
So the way I see this whole ensemble stuff we're talking about playing out is that when you go to an epistemic community to solve a problem, you may not have the cognitive style that that community offers you.
Yeah.
So I like what I call the Disneyland metaphor. Now, for those of you who have been to Disneyland, you know that
Folks, I have to go. You can continue, but it's
all right.
sorry.
You walk in the front gate, which takes you underneath a train track the train takes you around the park, so you see everything, the big picture. But you come up to a very tall bronze statue of Walt and Mickey waving at you, Mickey Mouse. When you walk around them, you go down Main Street. And when you get to the end of Main Street, you've gone through all the cafes and shops and stuff, which my grandfather called separators. They're there to separate you from your money. There's a travel circle. And the travel circle, like any highway travel circle, has outlets going all directions. And you choose your direction based on what attracts you. If you're really into driving little cars, then you go over here to this direction. And if you're into fairy princesses, you go that way. And if you're into steamboats and all of the rest of it, you go that way. But there's attractions, and they're all for the different styles of interests. And so an epistemic community should have many different ways of interacting, not just one.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense. I wasn't really necessarily, I guess I was just curious about if people thought we should be discussing certain things on some app or another. but I think also it's interesting just having a Zoom meeting has certain benefits as obvious downsides too, but it is nice to have a personal, more human. It's somehow, yeah.
David, I
Yeah,
think
I feel like
I think the history is that um, we've tried sort of, and everyone has their own idea of what
Yeah.
should work, and so it kind of peters out. But I don't think that should be any reason not to try again. So if you ever like if Joel or you have something on Ameliorate or elsewhere, and you're like, come try this, like let's try it. And it's a weird this is a weird group because everyone, it's like we all have the same like vague goal, and yet because we're passionate about the goal, I don't know if I am right now, but I definitely was like a year ago and before that. I mean, I still care about it, I just don't know how to do it right now. uh it's almost like we don't want to play in each other's sandboxes because we have such a strong idea of what a sandbox should
Yeah.
be. um so but if you create something on debate map or Ameliorate or elsewhere, mention it and keep pestering us about it to come try it. But yeah, it's hard.
We've also done beta
Yeah.
testing on different people's apps. So, they'll talk about our debate, we'll create a debate, we'll go in and all try and use the app and see how it's going. So that's another kind of option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me paint the picture this way. I spoke about an epistemic community, a knowledge working community, not a Facebook like place where you just gab about the kids and the cats and whatever. It's a place where you go to engage in serious thinking and engagement. But Dunbar tells us that he used to say that the largest stable social network that you could have, and he got this from studying cows, was 150 people. And he later co-authored a paper that said actually it's closer to 6. And the World Cafe people said 4 to 5 max at a table. That was it. And if you've ever been to a World Cafe where there was 20 people at the table, you know you got nothing done. But the ones where you had 4 or 5 people, you just kicked ass. All right. So what that tells you is Disneyland, the metaphor, cannot be for 30,000 or 100,000 people. You've got to have lots of Disneylands for just a few hundred people or a few thousand people max, and they all disperse amongst the various attractions. But what's important is that whatever you do inside of those epistemic communities, the knowledge structure that you create can federate with all of the others, can be shared among the others and federated to the point where you have this digital public library that is co-created by all of these epistemic communities that is trustworthy. Humans can go there and know that there's no fake news, there's no advertising or political interference with what was captured. It doesn't claim it's true. It only claims these are the worldviews and their beliefs behind them that have been articulated by tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people. Now, that gives the epistemic communities a collective voice in politics, for example, that it wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that's the purpose for CDL and for the work everybody in this room is doing, is solving global problems. And God knows we've got them.
Do you think creating our own apps, just like linking, being able to link from uh, a point on an app to another point on another app. Is that
Yes,
part of what you're saying?
that is entirely so here's one of the rides in my Disneyland. It is to go into all of the conversation spaces around and say, "Oh my God, this guy's disagreeing with that guy over here," and forge a coherence relation between them, wiring up the graph of all of these disparate conversations, and then doing that from the Federation, saying, "Oh, that guy way out there said this." So what you're doing is you are creating wormholes among the
Mhm.
conversations. That's critical to enlightenment to say, "Oh my God, I wasn't alone in thinking this," or whatever. Yes, you are building a social network based on hyperlinks.
Yeah. That is, I mean, that's very similar to stuff I've been thinking about in terms of the long term, in terms of like how linking just, I mean, this is still just in my debate app by itself. It's I was kind of thinking of the wormhole analogy also being able to start on one point and then go to um, be able to see, related points in totally other conversations. And then
That
being able to tunnel into that and see, oh, or just be able to see all at once, like, oh, these are all, this person answered a similar question that way, this person answered a similar question that way. And then you could even tunnel into another and like thinking of it as wormholes, that is something I
that
was thinking of it.
that's the breaking of the silo thinking that we all kind of
Yeah.
carry.
But I
We all
was,
carry with us our worldviews. But
yeah.
imagine that you're in a conversation about let's just say clean water, which is an issue on a global scale. And the wormhole takes you over to the climate change conversation area, and another wormhole takes you into the women's rights area, and another one takes you into whatever other, and you begin to see, hey, this conversation is bigger than us.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it is, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that is, and that's, I guess, part of the whole canonical
I don't think they
issue.
started out thinking this way, but it's evolving, at least it's evolving in my mind, that it was wrong-headed to think that I could put up SenseCraft, one app. It's just the first of many apps that go into what we call a K-hub, a knowing hub, which is our version of an epistemic community. But any epistemic community that agrees to behave by certain rules of not allowing advertising to impact what they say or political influence or whatever. And they also agree to an export format for their data to the Federation can be any epistemic community can be in the Federation that plays by the rules.
Mhm.
It's simple. Obviously, Facebook could never play in the Federation. Never happened. They don't play by the rules.
Mhm. How they how are they breaking? Because you're yeah. What rules are they breaking?
They use advertising to influence their participants. We would not allow that.
Yeah.
Now, there are ways that corporations can play in the space. I'll give you an example. Years ago, there was a TV commercial where it showed this really angry teacher sitting on a stool in a classroom, yelling at the camera, saying, "God damn it, we have to solve climate change, blah, 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 blah." And then the screen splits, and it's a scientist at Chevron
Mhm.
That's legal. But the minute they come in and try to put their finger on the scale of the conversation, no, that's not legal. Now, will Chevron ever do that? I doubt it.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be the conversation to be like, or because I was also kind of thinking about similar things. You don't, you know, you don't want the conversation uh, run by a company to be like end up being influenced by the company, so that it ends up being like, oh, well, it can slice, but can it also dice?
Well, so
You know, and then like, yes, it actually can, you know, and not being actual. You know, something that is just like a fake conversation to by the company's bots or whatever.
well, the business model would be that Chevron would pay a fee into an entity which installs epistemic communities and turns them on. Okay. It's kind of like buys an island in Second Life, which IBM did. Okay.
Right.
And when you buy an island in Second Life, that means you're buying an entire Linux server. That's how islands are Linux servers. Okay. And so K-hubs are Linux servers, whatever. So we could use the Second Life model, and an IBM can buy an island, but they didn't influence the conversation. In fact, IBM came away learning more than they had ever thought they could, because their managers would go into the island and hear their employees saying shit that they would never tell them in their face.
Mhm.
And it changed the karma of the conversations among the employees and their managers to the better. Okay. So there is a business model around this that physically can happen. But in fact, I could imagine an IBM buying an island in the K-Hub community. I could see that. I don't think I could see Chevron doing that.
Mhm.
They're just too invested in drill baby drill, and we're going to be lambasting the shit out of them in our conversations about climate change.
Mhm.
Uh, well, I should probably head out.
Yeah.
Yep,
Well,
it was fun. Thank you all.
All right.
see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.